So with me today is, of course, Stephen Hayes, who we have gotten to work with for, it's been 2 years now. It's been over two, maybe close to three. We've gotten to work on this project. Stephen teaches at Duke. He just won the 1858 prize in Southern art, contemporary Southern art from the Gibbs Museum, and he has a lot of things coming up that we're really excited about. And two of those things are at the museum. We will be unveiling the USCT sculpture November 13th, 2021. And on the same day, we'll be opening a large exhibition of Stephen's work in the Hughes Wing at the museum called Voices of Futures Past. So I wanted to give everyone just a little background about Stephen's work. This is the work that drew us to Stephen. This was his thesis work at SCAD, Cash Crop. Stephen, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, cash crop came from just the idea of me not learning much about the transport of people as goods and commodities from Africa to America in like high school or any kind of school. They didn't go into the depth or the history of how many ships there were or how many people were transported from Africa to America or how they were treated on that 6 to 8 week journey. Um, so find out there was an estimated 15 million people were transported. Made me think about how does that still happen today, and seeing the image of the Brooks slave ship plan, which is the image that depicts how they put the people in the ships, made me think about sweatshops in third world countries where people were packed in those same were packed inside of these sweatshops with just enough room to produce as much goods as possible, just as how those people were packed in those ships with just enough room to live, to survive for that amount of time. Um, and just think about how we still get how our goods are shipped here, you know, from these sweatshops in third world countries. So what I ended up doing is making 15 life-size statues. One represents 1 million, and chaining them all to a pallet. And so the pallet represents today and how, how we get our goods. So the pallet has a plumage on them carved onto the top of it. And it's one large pallet. It's made out of three pallets. So the plumage on them is on the back of your dollar bills.
Stephen, I wanted to ask you because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about, learning about the Middle Passage. When did you, do you remember how old you were that you started to really understand that there were 15 million people who were transported from Africa to America? I mean, it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately because I certainly wasn't, I don't remember learning these things in school, and I don't think I knew about them until I was older and read things on my own.
So I didn't know that, that I was asking 15 million people to transport until, I was in graduate school working on a project. But I learned about the Miller Passage my mom always kept me active in different groups and stuff. So she put me in a group called, Rites of Passage, which was, like an African American group where they taught young men about their African American history or about their African history. So I learned about the Miller Passage that way. Um, so I wasn't until like probably like 27, 26 until I learned about the transport of people, like the numbers or how many people there were transported.
For me, there's something so visceral about this work. And I guess I should say I've never actually seen it in person, which is kind of crazy because of the pandemic. I've only seen images, and I am so looking forward to seeing it at the museum. I see we've gotten some more people. I wanted to tell everybody we're a small group. We're just about 10 people. So if you'd like to, you can show us your face if you'd like. And if you'd like to jump in and ask Stephen a question, you are more than welcome to. I was going to ask Stephen about the material and the process for creating cash crop. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, cash crop is made out of cement, steel, and wood. Um, what I did was I casted friends and family members, people I met while I was in school, in graduate school, and some family members. What I did was basically the same way I ended up making um, Boundless statues. I casted the people. I had them sit down. Actually, I had them stand up, and I stripped them to their underwear. And basically, I told them about what the project was about. Well, what I did was, this was also a learning experience for them because a lot of them they also didn't learn anything about the transport of people. And what I did was, I made them stand still naked, and I placed these gauze over them where they couldn't move in a certain position. I made them stay in one certain position, and I basically told them like, "How do you feel?" Because they had to be stuck in this position for probably like 20 minutes, if that. And I asked them how do they feel because they stuck. They can't move for about 15 minutes. And I asked them how do they feel about being stuck in that position for for that time, and how would they feel being stuck in that position for 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of them said they would, a couple of them said they would kill themselves or try and kill someone, and just want to get into their mind and their thought about how they felt being, me being the captain of their body, like telling them like stay like this and you have to be like that for a certain amount of time. What basically I did was place these gauze over their body and they ended up stiffening and getting hard. I basically mummified them and I had to peel the shell off of them. And then I ended up filling it back with Portland cement. After I did that, I ended up making the ribs of a boat and bolting it all to the bodies, to the sculptures. And the backs of the sculptures are hand carved, the image of the Brooks slave ship plan. So I used a printmaking technique where I had ended up hand carving each back. So
It's
uh,
incredible, Stephen. How long did this project take you?
I I really didn't really keep track of time of how long it took because back then when I was working, I had a little studio space in the basement of a parking garage, which is probably about 20 foot by 20 foot, if that, maybe a little smaller. And I worked in there day and night. Sometimes I, didn't go to sleep or eat, and I just was in there working. I had a dream, and I wanted to see it through. Sometimes I get in a mode where it's just like, machine mode where I'm just trying to produce as much as I possibly can at a certain time. So,
And
yeah.
you cast yourself for this project.
Yeah, so that's the sculpture of me that's on the right hand side.
And what was that like for you?
I was stuck, I don't know how to explain it, that moment. Like like I said before, I'll be in a machine mode where it's like I gotta produce. And at that point in time, I'm just thinking about making and getting the job done that I need to get done. I didn't take time to process the thought of, I don't have control of my body at this moment. I have to stay like this for a certain amount of time. So I didn't think about that.
Right. Um, and what have you observed from people interacting with cash crop? I know in some of the installations, people are allowed to walk among the bodies and, to step over the chains. What is that experience like for viewers?
Um, the experience is for the most part is good because like this is a whole like teaching moment as far as or this is a I'm immersing people into the sculpture, into the artwork. They're becoming a part of the artwork, and at some points it becomes like a performance because like these people are trying to like dodge the chains and stuff and not step on them, but some people hit them and it makes this clanking noise and or they stumble over them, and that talks about that's a metaphor for like are we still stumbling over the past, are we, how is it still happening today? um but a lot of people come and thank me, they hug me, or a lot of people cry, they don't know what to say. I had people drop flowers off, at the foot of some of the statues. I had people come back 2-3 days in a row and just sit there and look at them. Yeah, this is know, a huge sculpture that people, you walk through it one time, you'll see one thing, you'll walk through another time, you'll see something new. There's all these different parts of this sculpture that means something different. Like the chains, I mean, not the chains, well, the shackles on the sculptures are actually railroad track ties. And it talks about the transporting of goods that way through the railroad system. All the chains are black. I learned how to blacksmith, and so they're all handmade, hand forged. Um, like each statue, they're all real people that exist today.
And I wanted to kind of transition from talking about Cash Crop to talking about your exhibition that's going to be at the Cameron Art Museum, because Cash Crop will be in the Hughes Wing. What else will be on display at CAM?
So you'll have Cash Crop, and you also have an exhibition called Voices of Futures Past, which is yeah, Voices of Futures Past. What I did was end up well, a lot of my work deals with like things I'm going through or things I've been through as a child or experiences I've had. But Voices of Futures Past comes from I guess like everyday life of African American youth. When I was a kid, I went to two different private schools, um, but one of them like focused on like English and math, and it was a small classroom, maybe 3 to 4 kids in a classroom. I was pulled outside of my classroom by a black guidance counselor who told me she needed to talk to me. And so I go to her office and I'm sitting with her and she's telling me that I need to apologize to a young Caucasian girl for something she think I did. And the girl told her that she thinks I touched her or that I sexually assaulted her. I never had a class with this girl ever. We shared like one recess, which was probably like 15 minutes, but still never like really got close enough to talk to her, mess with her, do anything. But the teacher told me that I need to apologize to this girl. Even though I told her I didn't do it, she said, "Hey, you're the oldest African American student in here. You gotta, either set an example, or you can either go to court or go to jail. I mean,
And
or parents can get in trouble."
Stephen, how old were you?
I was probably like sixth or seventh grade, somewhere in that area. And even though I kept telling this teacher, like, I never, with this guidance counselor, I never did it. It wasn't, anything I'd done. She still was trying to, steer me to go and apologize to this girl for something I didn't do. So after about 20 minutes of me going back and forth with this lady, I was like, I just gave up. And then at the end of the semester, at the end of the day, I seen the girl and I went up to her and I said, "I'm sorry for whatever you think you said, whatever you think I did." And the girl looked at me and laughed and walked away. And then a lot of my friends came up to me and was like, "Hey, what happened?" I told them, they was like, "Man, you never did it. Then why did you, go apologize?" And I couldn't say anything because I was basically forced to have to say I'm sorry for something I didn't do. And those are just like little incidents that happen. As a kid that I never told my mom about. And then you could think about things like, even though I got best friends, a white guy, we travel the world together. No matter where we go in the world, um, we're gonna have two different life experiences, even if we're side by side with each other. Because people will come up to me, like, "Hey, what's up, Snoop Dogg?" or try and give me high five because I'm the only black person, or they'll ask to buy drugs from me, which I never done a day in my life. Just because you see a black guy with dreads, you have these what is it, negative narratives that go on in the media or in the world that says like, "Oh, this is a black guy, this is what he does, blah 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 blah." And so, um, well, anyway, Voices of Futures Past comes from me creating a safe space for younger African American men to talk about what they're going through in today's society, to just be open and be able to talk about their experiences and what they're going through. So what I did was record the voices of these young men and I archived them and I gave them those examples about what I've been through, and I had them talk about what they're going through. They're like I think 12 to 18, their ages. And what I did was then cast a bust of older African American men that lived in that area. And I put the voices of those kids inside the bust of these men. So when people walk by, it's more like a performance where they have to walk to these sculptures and put their ear almost to the chest of this man to hear the voice of a kid talking about what they're going through in today's society. So that's Voices of Futures Past that'll be there at CAM as well.
So evocative. It's so beautiful. And I know you're considering recording some new voices. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, I would love to create another moment where I can record the voices of the younger African American kids that are there in that area, and maybe even find some guys that would be willing to sit down and pose for it to put in this to take the cam as well. Um,
I love that.
yeah.
I love it so much. Does anybody have any questions? Nan had a question, which I'll ask you, Stephen. And if anyone else has a question, please let me know. So Nan asked about cash crop and probably also Voices of Futures Past too. How did you decide the position of the heads? Some are slightly tilted. Did you position people for the casting or did they position themselves?
It's more like it's both a push and a pull. So for a cash crop, I just had them look full, look straight. For Voices of Futures Past, I kind of told the guys to tilt a little bit, or I gave them little instructions. But for the most part, it's all on them. They sit and I cast them the way they are.
And I wanted to go back. I'll go, I know my PowerPoint's not exactly in order. I wanted to go back to the faces of the men for the USCT sculpture. Um, and talk about them too. So for those of you who don't know, I know a lot of people on this Zoom. I think most of you are acquainted with the project and know that the final project will feature 11, the features of 11 men that Stephen cast at the museum. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what you were trying to do for the USCT sculpture with, because that there was a very specific focus in the things that you asked the men to do when you were casting them.
Well, first of all, the main focus was to try and get the features that were passed down from these generations, to get um, descendants of the USCT uh, to use their likenesses in the sculpture, because they're a reflection of our past and the people who fought for our freedom. Um, So, they knew already ahead of time what this sculpture was about, um, about their lineage. And, so I really I don't know if I really had to say much, but I did have conversations with them, asking them about how do they feel about being a part of this sculpture, and you having their likeness being, you know, as a statue forever now, to represent the colored troops that marched through Wilmington. Um, but we sat down and I casted each bus. You know, um, I allowed them to pose their face like as if they were getting ready to go into war, coming from a war. So a lot of the men just stood still, and I just casted their face the way they were.
Stephen, I wanted to tell you, I got a call from a descendant yesterday. So the word is getting out, which is super exciting. We're trying to connect with descendants, and in some cases, they're calling to connect with us. The day that Stephen did the casting, we were expecting, I think, 10 people, and we ended up having 18. And Stephen was on his feet for 12 hours that day casting faces. So he's going to be using 11, and I'll show you the original artist rendering. It's changed, but this gives you an idea of what the sculpture will look like. The sculpture will be situated on the last remaining vestige of what was Federal Point Road, which was the road that, and Matt is better at talking about this than I am. It's the road that went from Carolina Beach and all the way to Wilmington. The last little bit that's remaining is on the Cameron Art Museum's grounds. That's right in front of the breastworks. So there are 3 rows of 3 soldiers in partial relief, and then 2 men in full 3D in the front. And then on the back, And I noticed that some of our volunteers are here who actually were researching the names of the men. On the back will be inscribed the names of the first three regiments um, of the 5 USCT regiments that fought at Forks Road. We thought in the beginning that there were 1,600 men total. We know now that just in the first three regiments, there were about 2,000 men. And we've got two more regiments that we want to research their names. Unfortunately, it will not fit on this sculpture, but the first three, which were the first three regiments, which suffered casualties and saw the most, I don't know, they call it action, right? In the battle, those names will be forever engraved on the back of the sculpture, which is really wonderful. And we're creating an educational site so that children can come on field trips. You can purchase a paver so that your name can be forever placed on the USCT site as well. So here's some images. And please feel free to ask a question either by unmuting yourself and just asking a question or asking a question in the chat. Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit about the process?
Yeah. I mean, the process is, I cast the faces of all of them and then end up recreating these. The bodies, the figures are moving. I wanted to make the figures look like they were not standing still, but in the moment of moving. Like, so when you look at the feet are like basically off the ground almost, just the tip of the toes are just touching, like they're in stride and movement. So uh, the clothes, the cloth, the draping, it's all in movement and flowing. I want to leave the strokes of my hand in there so you can see like the movement or still see the artist's hand in the sculpture. The faces are the only thing that are like super smooth on the sculpture.
I love that about it. I have a question. Oh, it's Aquanetta. Hey, Aquanetta. Aquanetta is one of our board members, Stephen. So she asked, what characteristics? Hi. Do you want to ask your question yourself?
Well, I guess I can. I'm a little shy with this, but I can. So, Stephen, I was asking what characteristics are you choosing for the 11 men that you select out of the 18? Or is there anything that stands out that you would like for those 11 men to display?
I think I was just looking at how each feature played off each other for each row. And I was just looking at how they work together as a whole. So basically, it's 3 rows of 9. So I just wanted to play off each feature for each row. I don't know how I chose the character. It's been so long ago. But yeah, that's how I just wanted to make sure each one played together. If that answer your question a little bit.
Hey, Renee. So this is a picture of Stephen and Ann Brennan, our director, in Stephen's studio. These are some images from the Foundry. Stephen, can you talk us through the process at the Foundry? It's been a real learning experience for me.
So the Foundry, what they do, they take sculpture I create, similar to like the one in my background, it's white sculpture. They'll take that, and what they're gonna do is put a rubber shell over it, like paint rubber over it, and that's gonna create a mold of the sculpture that I created. And then they'll put a plaster mold over that, which is called a mother mold, which is gonna make sure that that rubber mold does not shift and move when they pour, shift and move after they take, sorry. They do the rubber mold, then they put a plaster mold shell around that rubber mold, which is called a mother mold, which keeps that rubber mold from shifting after they take the sculpture out of it. So after they take the sculpture out of it, they put it back together. They put the rubber mold back together. They put the mother mold back around that rubber mold. And then they pour a liquid wax inside of that rubber mold. The wax then ends up curing and getting hard so they can take that wax off. So right now, what you see is just the sculpture itself. That'll be turned into wax. They'll cut it in parts and they'll turn that into wax. Once that wax is done, they're going to do another mold of that wax, which is called a lost wax mold. So what they'll do is they'll dip that into a slurry, like a very fine slurry that connects to that wax, and then they'll keep doing that. I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 times until it creates this thick shell, probably about 2 inches thick. Then they'll put that shell inside of a kiln, which will then make that shell like hard like a rock, and it'll then melt out the wax. So what you'll have is a negative of the sculpture as a ceramic shell. By that time, they should have the bronze into liquid. So they'll pour that liquid hot bronze into that ceramic shell, which then they'll break the ceramic shell off, and you end up having this right here, which is the bronze of the sculpture. So this
These
is,
blow me away. And Stephen, you're going to go Friday to the Foundry.
I'll be going to the Foundry Friday to see these and also to drop off some other projects.
So you guys check our social media feed for new images. This is one of my favorite juxtapositions. On the left, you see James White as featured in the New York Times in the article that they wrote about this project. And on the right, you see the cast of James's face. I can't wait to see it in person. James is one of our USCT reenactors who has been involved from the beginning. Stephen, I have 2 questions for you, some wonderful questions. So September, who you know, asks, she says, this project gave you an opportunity to address heroism amidst conflict, whereas Cash Crop or Voices of Futures Past have heroism or resilience as a subtext. What direction has your work taken while working on Boundless? Has it influenced your work?
I think a lot of my work has a lot of influences on my work in general. But Boundless gave me the opportunity to do something like super out of, not in my comfort zone, out of my comfort zone, where, this work wasn't like for me and like what I do, because my work deals with capitalism, consumerism, and brainwashing, the ideas of the Black body and stuff. So this made me, this is commission, because so at the end of the day, this isn't my work. This is your work. This is the community's work. So it allowed me to create a public sculpture that, is not, I mean, it is of my voice, but it's not of my voice, if that makes any sense.
You're channeling voices.
Yeah. So
Which I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's one of the things that has amazed me so much about watching you work, Stephen, is that you listen so deeply to the community, and you have talked and listened to all of these descendants and the reenactors, and I feel like everything that they have told you, you've thought about those things deeply, and it has been articulated through the sculpture. It's just really beautiful.
thanks. Thank you. But I mean, as far as like all the work that I'm doing, everything has an influence on what I've done, or what I'm going to do. So I've learned a lot in the process of creating this sculpture, and for every sculpture that I've done, there's a whole learning process, relearning. I like to say I fail at a lot of stuff, and I learn a lot from these failings, and which I guess it makes me a master of many things. So I learn a lot from these things I fail at. So yeah, I'm influenced a lot by a lot of different things that I do.
Well said. There's another question that connects with that. iPhone, I don't know who iPhone is, but hello. I was curious about Stephen's influences, artists he admires, historic and contemporary.
And I'm influenced by everyday life. I can be influenced by driving down the road and seeing something on the side of the highway or on the side of the road. I'll stop out my car and I pull on the side of the road and I pick up objects and I throw it in my trunk and they become part of the sculpture later on. I can be influenced by the way rope is draped on like a utility truck. And I can put it in my artwork. I can just remember how like, oh, I love the way this rope was draped, and I want to recreate that and put it in this piece of sculpture. Um, Music plays a role. A lot of times I don't really look at a lot of artists' work because I don't want to be super influenced by like what they're doing and try and like recreate what they do. So a lot of stuff comes from like me naturally and trying to create something that that I like. Um, you know, like this is making art is like what I do and what I've been doing since I was a kid. So when I come into work, I don't think of it as work, because I love it, and so I'm always like making stuff, not thinking about where it's gonna go because I'm just being a kid right now, just trying to see what I can create. I'm dreaming, I'm daydreaming, and I'm just creating stuff. And, if it sells, if it don't, if it doesn't go anywhere, if it goes to a museum, I'm happy. In the end of the day, I'm happy about what I created, and I'm basically creating a voice, or giving life to something that didn't have a certain meaning at a certain point in time. I'm creating a meaning for objects that people are throwing away.
And you've created such a strong voice and really not a very long time. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the narrative threads that run through your work.
Uh, so, like I said before, my work deals with capitalism, consumerism, and brainwashing, and the ideas of the black body, how the black body is being seen. Basically, I want to try and change the way somebody who looks like me is being seen. I want to, those negative narratives that they have on, somebody that looks like me. I want to change that. I was one of those kids at a certain point in time. I wanted to be like what I seen on TV. I wanted to emulate these. I want to be like these guys. Just because you know they're hot, they're popping, they're it's a social light. And it wasn't until I was like 16 or 17 where I decided to change that. Where I didn't want to have that suit like Master P or Puff Daddy had on. I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to emulate them. And I wanted. I kind of stepped away from the materialistic things. My brother is one of the people who helped influence me to get away from that kind of stuff. Um, but throughout my artwork, I have three different objects, which is a horse, the ear of corn, and the chess piece, the pawn. The horse comes from the ideology behind the Willie Lynch letter about how to make a slave. And in that letter, he compares people to horses. He says the same way you break a horse is the same way you break the male slave. You whip them to existence. You beat them till they had to fear of God. Now, basically, this letter was creating a way to create a hierarchy to make a slave, and make the slave loyal to them to the end of time. So you say you compare the dark skinned slave against the light skinned slave, you can you put the one with the nappy hair against the one with the curly hair, and this creates this hierarchy where they're continually telling of themselves over and over. So me reading that, seeing that, and talking about comparing people to horses made me think about how does that still happen today, and how could I create something that talks about that. So what I decided to do was use the horses instead of using the figure, the body figure. If you were to have a horse back then with a broken leg, you'll put that horse down because it's useless and it's not going to produce. It's not going to create that product or do what it needs to do. So they end up putting that horse down because it's more cost efficient to kill the horse than to try and nurse it back to health. So what I do is with my horses, I cut all the legs off the horse and I put a lot of different legs, different length styles and designs on the horses. And so if I was to take the horse down, the sculpture of the horse down and put it on the ground, the horse is going to fall over because there's no 3 to 4 legs that's going to support the horse or hold it up. So that's a metaphor for we're given everything we need to destroy ourselves. We have this super giant today in today's world, just like social media, and it plays a role in the growth of youth, or people, where they're trying to trend, they're trying to get as many likes as possible, they're trying to do all these different challenges, and kids see this and they try and do this, they try and emulate these people, and even if they try, it's like a popcorn generation. Like, you put the popcorn in the microwave, boom, instant popcorn, you can eat right in, but they don't know how to work, work ethic and being happy with what you got, or trying to build up what you got instead of like trying to get that instant gratification. So the next object I use in the piece in my artwork is the ear of corn. And with the ear of corn, what I do is take the corn out and I put the slave ship inside of it. Corn is a GMO, genetically modified organism. So what I'm doing is, each ear of corn, each little kernel is basically a person. And me putting the slave ship in it is talking about how is we as people, genetically modified organisms, how are we being programmed to produce a certain outcome. The next piece I use in my artwork is the chess piece, the pawn. In a game of chess, the pawn is there to allure and attract your opponent, to make them do something. So the pawn doesn't, the pawn is there, it's exposable. So if the pawn dies, it's fine. It was there to do a certain job. And today we have these pawns that we put on these pedestals. So it doesn't mean anything that this pawn is getting the money, it's getting all these clothes, it's attracting all these girls with cars and all this stuff. This pawn is here on this pedestal because all these companies are giving this pawn, this thing, these products that these kids are seeing and they want to buy and they emulate. They want to be just like this pawn. They're buying these Jordans, they're buying all these different clothes and stuff that this pawn is kind of selling. But all the money is still going back to these companies. So it doesn't mean anything that this pawn is winning right now, because there's other pawns that are going to come up later on and do the same thing. It's going to sell these materialistic goods. So are the 3 different objects I use in my artwork at the moment.
Thank you, Stephen. I've got a question for you from Sassy Stevens. Sassy says, I can see the pain in the sculptures standing in the pallets, holding on to their privacy, bound in chains. Life will never be the same. Freedom lost, families separated, and unspeakable cruelty through this middle passage. Your art foretells a history that has been ignored. We are still fighting to prove we are human and not 3/5. Thank you, Stephen. Your mind and hands are brilliant. I echo what Sassy said. Thank you so much, Stephen. So Stephen's exhibition will be opening inside the museum November 13th and will be up through March. I wanted to tell everybody a little bit, and we have some of our wonderful research volunteers, just to talk a little bit about the research that we've been doing into the history of the USCT. This is something that Devin Kelly, our public historian, wrote up about one of our USCT soldiers that she's learned more about. We now have a list of almost 2,000 men that we need to learn more about them. We have their names. We had not known their names before, and now we get to find out who they were, what they did before the war, what they did after. So if you're looking for a fulfilling and exciting volunteer opportunity, please let me know. We're always looking for volunteers to help with this project. And I wanted to let people know, especially because we have some CAM staff on the call, like September, who's our Director of Lifelong Learning, that there are next steps. We see the USCT sculptures really just the beginning. It's been a dream that we have had for a long, long time. But following the installation, we will have curriculum development, curriculum to distribute to the schools, field trips for students, a docent program that we will develop just for the USCT sculpture, ongoing site interpretation. And we also have a USCT program series coming up starting in November and running through February, funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. We'll be featuring former US Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey. It's coming, and musician and historian Mary D. Williams. So I know you want to be involved, right? I have to do a pitch and then I will stop sharing my screen and we can all just chat. We are selling brick pavers so that you can have your name be a permanent part of this installation. The last day to buy pavers is actually June 30th. We're selling pavers till the end of June. So if you're interested, you can buy a paver online or you can email me. It's really easy. Just get in touch and let us know. We'll stop sharing the screen. If you'd like to show your face, we'd love to see you. I'd like to just open it up to questions. So let me know if you have any questions for me or for Stephen. I also happen to have with us tonight Matt, who is a grad student at UNCW in history. His thesis is on the collective memory of the Civil War in Wilmington. So if you have a question, please ask. Oh, we do. September says to Stephen, she says, "You said we have everything in the world we need to destroy ourselves, but you're showing us the power of art to teach and communicate ideas. You have also told us what it is like to be a young Black man in school, not always learning the details of the past. What would you like us to teach the youth that come through our grounds?" What a beautiful question.
Oh man. Yes, amazing question. I don't know what, I guess growing from our past is what, and being truthful about the past is the number one thing, and learning how to grow from that and to be able to communicate with one another without being offended, but learning how to be family at the end of the day. Because we only have one world, and we have one life, but teaching people how, not to hate, and how to love, and know that, we all bleed red, we all bleed the same color. We all have a heart. Um, just learning from each other and not being afraid to learn and then communicate with each other. I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect. Stephen, we're so lucky that you're a teacher and that you're a father. That's what I just kept thinking. 'Cause so much of your work seems to be powered by what you would like to tell the youth, right? It's so beautiful and you're so articulate. Hi, Sassy. It's nice to see your face. September says thank you. Anybody else have questions for Stephen?
Feel free to ask any questions. Okay.
Stephen, what's next for you? You are so busy. Y'all, this guy just won the 1858 Contemporary Southern Art Prize. You've got an exhibition coming up at the Gibbs, yes?
So I got an exhibition coming up at the Gibbs. I got an exhibition, some work coming up at North Carolina Museum of Art, which should be in August, which I got to start working on. Also helped co-curated a show that's going to be at the Harvey Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not none of my artwork, but it's other artists that I know that are making art today, and they're doing big things. What else? I'm doing a ton of like commission pieces for. Got one for the city of Durham. Also have one. We'll have two in Charlotte, North Carolina. Also, I'm making a sculpture of Lavelle Moulton, who is a basketball coach at North Carolina Central University. They are dedicating a park to him later on this month. So the sculpture is not going to be done in time, but it's completed, but it's not going to be in bronze at the moment. What else? I'm making a ton of stuff. That's all I
That's
can think.
plenty. And also, Stephen has twin boys that are turning 2 on July 23rd. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you, everyone. If you have anybody else has a question, feel free to ask. I won't keep you too long. Wanted to keep this just under an hour, but thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Oh, one more message. Let's see. Stephen. This is from Aquanetta. She says, "We are so honored to have you with us this evening. We will always learn so much about you and your work. Thank you for your creative and humble hands."
Thank you, Aquanetta. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you, everyone. Mark your calendar for November 13th. Come see the unveiling of the sculpture. We're having a fundraiser September 18th for the sculpture. You can buy tickets online right now. They're $35. We're also selling raffle tickets for a raffle to raise money for the sculpture. So there's lots of ways to support the installation of the sculpture and the work that's going to happen after in Wilmington. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.